Hi Vicki.
Hi Peter.
Thanks very much for coming and doing this, and I think probably just for everyone's benefit watching it would be great to start with just perhaps your current role and the dimensions maybe of that role, and then we can maybe hear a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Currently I am in the Executive General Manager role for the retail bank for NAB. The dimensions of the business are quite large. We have about 6,000 people, over 6,000 people, highly distributed workforce as well, and highly diverse.
And I mean, a lot of people watching go, how the hell did you get to that level? So what's the evolution that you've taken through your career to get there?
Yeah, quite a lot of broadening opportunities along the way. So it wasn't I certainly don't have a background in banking. I didn't sort of go through a branch and then a regional manager and executive general manager. My background's distribution. What I learnt very early in my career is that many of the skills that you attain in distribution are very generic and they're very portable. But you have to know that yourself, and you have to be able to articulate that and get people to back you. I've also worked in human resources as well, and so sales and human resources meant that leading a large people business was probably always the direction that I'd take.
That's a good combination. So how did the whole leadership pathway start for you? You know, do you remember back then, and kind of maybe what was the impetus for you taking that direction?
I think in the early stages, leadership kind of chooses you. You don't choose it, or you don't consciously recognise it in that way. Probably the first time that I realised it had to be there for me was when I led projects, and the content became secondary actually, and what was most important to me was actually getting results through people. That was when I first kind of went, you know what, the content's not as important as the journey, developing people and achieving results in a team-based way, and leading that was what I really got energy from.
Great. And was, you know, when you look back, was there, whilst you said it chose you, was there anyone or anything that was formative to you wanting to take that pathway? Yeah,
I think what I realised was that there was something to leadership. So I think there's a point at which you realise that great leaders are not just born out of subject matter experts, and in fact sometimes the reverse can be true. And so the project work for me kind of said, you know, the content I don't need to know. What I need to know is how to assemble a group of people who have that subject matter expertise, who come together to form a team, and my role is actually to create that and to provide direction, to provide vision and encouragement and motivation, and to celebrate and recognise great results. So it was really that work that said to me, there's something in this that's distinct from the content.
Great. You would have had to transition many times through your career into higher roles, and I'm sure at times some of those roles looked pretty big in the sense of what that meant for you in terms of your next move. Have you got any experience or things to share around what makes the transition effective? Sure,
yeah. Look, I think the first thing, and this is particularly something that I talk very much with women about, is, you know, that whole feeling uncomfortable going into a new role. And I think the first thing you need to realise is that nobody actually knows what they're doing.
Yes.
You know, everybody makes it up as they go, even if they look like they know what they're doing. And the reality is you only go into a new role to get stretch. If you know exactly how to do it, the challenge isn't there for you. So I think firstly, accepting that. The second thing I think is, I heard a great quote from a very successful AFL coach, which is, know, accept and perform your role. And when you transition into a larger leadership role, whatever you've done previously, you do have to leave some of that behind. Particularly if you stay in the same business unit, you have to make space for other people to step in and do what you were doing and know that you're there to lead. I think one of the key things that I see people do that really act as an inhibitor to their success is they try to lead by doing. Not by leading, and you have to accept that your role, you have to know that your role is as a leader, you've got to accept it, you have to perform it and let others do what they need to do to make the whole team successful.
Great. Looking back, has there been some people that have been influential to you? You mentioned the AFL coach then, but people that kind of you thought has sort of modelled leadership for you and perhaps been a little bit guiding for you as to how you wanted to go about it?
Absolutely. I've had a few key people that I've had the privilege of working with actually, and I think one in particular I've worked with many times throughout my career, and there's a few things that this person does particularly well, and I think one of the things for teams is setting the context. So some people might articulate that as the vision, but I think it's context is something that needs to be there for people in the everyday, because it actually helps them make decisions. Clarity around expectations is really important as well, and you know, sometimes I think leaders lose their team if they're not clear about what success looks like. People do want to know that.
Yeah.
And I think also aligning to purpose. You know, more and more I think in the workplace people are looking for something that has meaning for them.
Yes.
And so aligning to a purpose, whether that's around the customer or whether it's around an employee value proposition, I think those things need to be there. And the leader that I have in mind as I'm talking right now did all of those things remarkably well, and also had a lot of composure. And I think, you know, what you learn as a leader is that when things are thrown at you, you need to be quite adaptive, and it's really important that you respond, you don't react. You have composure because your team are looking to you to see how they should behave and whether they should worry or not. And so I think this person, as a leader, did that remarkably well. Was always very clear about the context that we were operating in, and also clarity of expectation too. I think the other thing is bringing a team together. When you first take on a team, to know that you don't have to have all the answers, but actually to work with the team around how we want to be, not how you want them to be, but how we want to be. And that does involve time, and it certainly involves a conversation which says, what are the principles that we want to abide by in this team? How do we want to behave? How do we want to be with each other? One of the key principles that the leader I have in mind will always have in her teams is that, you know, no matter who's in the room, the same decision will be made. And that means by default that you have to get across each other's business and you're representing the collective. And leveraging the collective is a big part of how she leads as well.
So just reflecting perhaps on your recent experience with NAB and you know, underpinning that, in most of your roles, quite a lot of change going on. How do you bring context to a group of people within a context of a lot of change? Can you share some things that you might talk about within that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we are always undergoing change, and I think the first thing you have to do is create the case for change, because, you know, one of my favourite sayings is the status quo is not an option. It really is. I mean, we're always wanting to move forward, and one of the things that we will often do with my team in a practical sense is when we get together as a leadership team, we talk about an external perspective. Now that could be anything. So somebody in the team will come with an external perspective. It might be something that another corporate in Australia is doing. Typically it will not be a financial services example, because, you know, we exist in a big society, and customer preferences are very much informed by what is happening out there. So a lot of that exogenous stuff we bring to the table, and then we sort of say, well, okay, how do we make meaning of that? What might that mean for us? And does it provoke a conversation or a case for change? We're very transparent with the people that we lead, and we will start a conversation with them when we don't have the answers. And that provides some context for them as well. It certainly gets them comfortable with the fact that we can have a conversation about how might we work this out, as opposed to the leadership team are going to come in one day and say, okay, this is how it's going to be now. So we use external perspectives. We often will refer to the broader strategy that exists across the enterprise, the personal banking role within that, and then within that the retail role. So, you know, within our businesses, for example, a key thing for us in recent years has been optimising within the channels themselves. But now we're at a sufficient level of maturity that for us it's all about the integrated customer experience, that kind of one NAB that a customer is looking for. And so increasingly we talk about the enterprise strategy in that context and the role of retail, and what is it that we need to do to deliver to the integrated customer experience. It's not just about our success, it's about shared success. And our people then get a sense that that's the context they're now operating in, and it's important that they deliver to those things, not just think about their own bottom line.
Yeah, great. You mentioned clarity of expectations as well, and I mentioned within a context of having to grow consistently, how do you go about being clear but not too stretched stretching in a sense of your expectations of what performance looks like?
I mean, the business that I work in, as I said, it's a large business. It's more than 6,000 people. So you really need to think about how do you get the whole system going in the right direction.
Yeah.
We use tools such as scorecards, incentives and things like that to actually give people clarity around the goals or the key performance indicators that we're looking for them to hit. Yeah. The freedom for them is how they then go about that. Yeah. And so, it is very clear at the beginning of the year what we're aiming for. Sometimes within, the space of several months that might change and we need to refocus on a particular area. Now, we're very clear with our people when that happens, and one of the things that I'm very keen to ensure is that there's a great cascading of messaging. So I know when I walk into one of our 785 stores out there that if I hear somebody say something that I've said, then I know it's working, because it means that their leaders have communicated to the regional executive, and the regional executive has communicated to the branch manager, and the branch managers had the conversation with their team. And so communicating across a big system, keeping the message simple but also really frequent. And we often say that, as soon as I'm really sick of hearing myself say something, that's probably the first time the front line is hearing it, and it's time to say it again. Right. So we do whatever the system needs, not what makes us intellectually satisfied.
Good. Yeah. Now, you are recognised for a real strength in your people leadership and approach, and I know you have a strong interest in coaching. Can you tell us about how that emerged for you and why that became something that was important for you?
Yeah, look, I think I talk about coaching as the gift that keeps on giving, because I think that and if you walk into our stores, you'll see that written on whiteboards. We have a very deep coaching ethos in retail, but even before my time in retail, I truly believe that that coaching is about sustainable outperformance, because you actually, have people discover their own capability and you set that free. That liberates the whole system. It means you remove key person dependency. It means that you see potential unleashed that you didn't expect, and that's a wonderful thing as a leader. So building capability, having people build their own capability, I think is the greatest gift that you can give as a leader to your team or any business that you happen to lead.
You mentioned sustainability. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that, and perhaps the sustainability performance too?
Sure, yeah. So the sustainability for me is the fact that the capability is within the individual. So as a coach, you're there to serve. It's not about you. In fact, it requires you to subvert your ego, and that's a challenging thing for some leaders to do. But if you build capability within the individual and there's a self-discovery for that individual in that, when you walk away, that's still there. So it has an enduring nature. It also builds confidence, because once somebody discovers they can do something they didn't think that they could do, or that they're good at something that they didn't think they were good at, then that becomes self-propelling, and they're brave enough and courageous enough to discover new things as well. In terms of performance, coaching is absolutely an unashamable commercial undertaking. We have coaching as part of our skills practice in our store network every day. And that's because we want our people to get better at having curious conversations with our customers, understanding their needs, fulfilling those needs, and that absolutely impacts our shareholder bottom line. So we talk about the service profit chain a lot. Happy people, happy customers and happy shareholders. Coaching actually ticks every box across that service profit chain, yeah.
Great. And have you got a sense for, generally, in terms of all of those conversations you've had and the people that have been reporting to you that have had, what are some of the really key things that you can enable and that you need to deal with people along the journey?
Oh, sure. I mean, a lot of it is depending on which level you're operating at. I mean, for me, a lot of my coaching with my team is spent around their leadership and how well they're coaching. But in a branch, a lot of time is spent on a particular skill that a person needs to develop, and that might be about a conversation with a customer. It might be about how they interact with the team and how they leverage the expertise of people around them. In some instances it's very pointed, in other instances it's a deeper exploration around somebody's aspirations and the things that they're really wanting to do in terms of their own development. So it's multifaceted, highly adaptable and an integral part of how we go about it.